Hello and welcome to this video on the ST Font by NANO Modules. We'll explore ways to create and manipulate stereo patches with multimode filtering, saturation and some more advanced self-patching. Here's what's to come. This video is sponsored by NANO Modules. The new ST font is of course based on the NANO Modules font filter design that they call a liquid filter that's achieved with the 2164 ICs. If you'd like to hear that directly, I made a demo back in 2009 for its release and I'll link that down below. The ST font builds upon the original font filter core and expands it into stereo and multimode filter morphing, plus it has a saturating stereo VCA at the input and a new wild resonance mode. Let's take a look at the features. ST font is 14 HP wide and 40mm deep, so it's skiff friendly. From top to bottom, we can see these black controls that are the main controls for filter frequency, resonance, and the filter mode, blending between low pass, band pass, and high pass. We then move down to the three white knobs, which control the stereo span. These add additional offsets to the main filter controls, and again you can offset the frequency, resonance, and mode from the three main controls above. We then have a stereo input VCA with a soft clipping bass saturation, and markers to show where unity gain is, and then full saturation, plus LEDs to show when you're driving this input VCA into the filter core. There's a switch for mild or wild resonance, and then we have attenuators for CV inputs for the frequency, resonance, and mode. We then have unattenuated CV inputs for the span controls to span frequency, resonance, or mode. You have a drive VCA CV input, and the main control becomes an attenuator for this when you patch into it, and there's also a volt per octave for that whole filter core. We have stereo inputs and outputs, and the left input normals to the right for mono to stereo patching. There's plenty of ways to make use of stereo filtering, whether it's taking mono sources and making them stereo, working with stereo inputs, more advanced self-patching, and anything here from basic to more complex synthesis and modulation approaches. Patches covering all of these things are on screen and linked down below in the timing index, so do skip around as you like, and let's dive in. So of course we need to hear the filter before we make any patches here. Universal filter test, which is a low pitch saw wave coming in from Honor here, green trace and cables, and then blue and red traces and cables are the left and right stereo outputs. I'm at unity gain at the input, so this is clean, no resonance, and let's start with the low pass. Really smooth filtering. Let's add a little bit of res. And then keep upping the res. And I'll play with the input drive as well. back up and go to bandpass. Round to high pass. You have all the in-between morphing positions there. It's not a switch to go from those different filter types. Now let's play with the span and get some stereo images. We'll go mildly resonant and a bit of input drive, but not too much. For the right side, you can span the frequency. You could add more resonance to the right side. And you can even change the mode, offsetting that position. We're creating a kind of spectral seesaw there, whereas we open a low pass, a high pass closes, and vice versa. And one other thing, just to self-patch here, because the behaviour is nice, if I take my mixer into mono, and we just monitor the right side output, if I patch the left out back to the right in, so the signal path is now into left, out of left, to the right in, right out, and we span the modes, we can create a variable width bandpass, where changing the mode, rather than it being the same on both sides, say a band on both sides, we can set the main controls to low pass, so the whole thing is now a low pass. The left side will stay the same, but we can span the mode out to a high pass on the right, and with those span controls, we can create these variable width, kind of twin peak bandpass, or go high pass on the main setting and negatively offset to low. There's a lot of potential for creative patching, so let's get into the patches. So here's a patch that explores two things. One is taking a kind of classic mono synth line and making it stereo, and the other is exploring some acidic, acid style filtering. Lots of modulation, accent patching, nice acidic sequence. Let's break down what's going on. So to start with, here's no modulation, just a saw wave from Honor, the analog oscillator here, into the input, stereo out into my interface. And that liquidy vocal style resonance instantly screams, give me some acid. But without the resonance, this is drive all the way up. There is some modulation that's just a 5-volt offset, so there's no difference in this case from just unpatching it. And the first thing I set up here was this green trace, my main envelope, into the frequency. So as I open up that attenuator, great thick tones, or pushing the resonance. More acidic tones. And then with this kind of acidic-like filtering in mind, I set about creating an accent pattern, just removing my main envelope there. So the blue trace here is a quarter note envelope. These are coming from ARC. And it's patched in a range of ways here, all on the blue cables. But the one you're hearing is the volt per octave. I'm treating this like a secondary frequency modulation input for the whole of this ST font there. Then on top of that quarter note opening up, I want to add some resonance on that step. And with a high resonance, already it's easy to go too far. And I'm also going to add a mode modulation. And then bringing the main envelope back in. Ah, sounds good. And then with these kind of like drastic knob turns, I wanted to add some step motion, which is this red trace here, and I'm patching this into the frequency span, so the right side. Let me just isolate this in the mixer. If we just listen to that right hand side, here's normal. So this is just the right side. And then step modulating its frequency. It's got this really lovely rhythmic kind of tripping over itself. Push and pull almost. So when I bring in the left output and then patch this one back to the hard right side, I've got this very wide stereo enhanced signal. I'm having too much fun with this. Legs are wiggling, head's bobbing. And then finally patching in the offset back to drive. This will then attenuate that signal. Mixing with my offset, yellow cable and trace here, is an AUDIORATE source. And as I bring that up in an external utility just off screen, we have some AM on the way in, amplitude modulation from another oscillator here. If I remove it, listen to how this kind of overtone changes. So here's some really filthy bass from a sine wave and the ST font, and just two envelopes into the modulation here. Here's my backing drums. And here's the bass. Now there is a little bit of sidechain ducking where the kick was. I'll remove that in the modulation, and let's take a look at what's going on. So here's a sine wave from Honor. It's the green trace here, and the blue trace is our output. And with the input VCA and its drive, we can square this off. And my thinking was to try and double up this drive by coming into the filter, then out, then back into the other side, and out of the other side, passing through the left side driving VCA to the filter, out of the filter to the right side driving VCA, and back to the filter. So I'll patch the output here with this orange cable to the right side input, and then we'll come out of the right side. So sine wave hits drive, then a bandpass hits drive, then back to a bandpass. And just this, before we go wild, I think sounds great. It's really vocal, very characterful. Let's go into the wild mode here. And it's pretty wild. And I mean, at this point, I could just remove the sign. We've got this kind of self-abusing dual oscillator thing happening. So let's get some modulation in here, and we'll start with the main frequency control. And I've inverted this on the attenuator, so the whole thing ducks in frequency and comes back up again. And then the other modulation is a rhythmic envelope to span. So with the span on that right side moving with that rhythm, all the frequency ducking with this envelope. It's really kind of filthy modern bass sound design, literally from a sine wave and just this filter. Drums back in. And I'll just keep playing around for a moment. So here we're taking simple effects chains and pushing and pulling them around. In the stereo font. This is all coming from rings. Muting that. This is how the effects from rings, which is a big reverb, through the stereo font sounds. It's got this kind of gargly, dystopian, noisy texture, and lots of movement pushing and pulling it in and out of the mix. So again, here's rings, dry in the mix. This sound goes into the effects aid for just a really big reverb that's coming into the stereo font, and simply opening up a low pass filter here. Let's push the drive. And this might be all you need in terms of processing effects, or all you want. Just a nice, soft, slow LFO on a filter. Slowly bringing in the top end in an effects chain. If I'm going to modulate here more rhythmically with this blue tracing cable to the frequency, giving me some stepped random. And let's use another stepped random, red tracing cable to resonance, and just that against rings. It's a really lovely kind of supporting rhythmic layer. Muting rings again, I have a slow LFO to mode that's going to push this round to more of a bandpass style behaviour at points. And then I'm using a faster LFO, green tracing cables, to the input drive, the input VCA. And this is an LFO that's modulating itself, so we have this kind of speed up and slow down. But let's actually push this a bit further. In my mixer, I have some noise. And this is sample and hold, sampling a noise source, and the rate of the sample and hold is controlled by an oscillator, allowing me to clock the noise. And if I patch that into the frequency span, you can hear that noise is kind of gargling away. If I drop the rate of it, we have this kind of bubbly sound. I like this grungy noise that's just kind of poking its head into the effects chain and its filtering. Against rings one last time. So here we're going to create these heavily saturated, kind of wild, because of the wild resonance, really super wide stereo drones. These are free running, slow LFOs. Let's mild this out. Remove the effects. And I think this is a good way to get a real feel for the character of the filter. Let's go wild. From lovely vocal liquidness, even with a lot of drive there, to, I think it's fair to say, pretty wild resonant behaviour. Drowning this in effects one last time. So here we'll explore processing drums with the stereo font. It's a stereo drum mix at the input. I'm using an envelope follower with the input VCA and drive for a nice saturating heavy compression effect. Resonant high pass doing a bass boost, and some subtle kind of AUDIORATE gargling, weird modulation if you like. Just kind of working away in the background on the frequency input. So with no modulation, no resonance, and a clean input VCA level here, here's a low pass filter. And we have a really nice soft filter there. Really smooth. Now if we just slam the input gain a bit more, get some really lovely clipping. You can hear it really kind of beef out that kick drum. We can go too far, at least for my taste here. But we'll leave this with a little bit of clipping and drive. Let's go to a high pass filter here. And this could be a performative thing where you just want some saturation and maybe a nice stereo high pass that's quite resonant to sweep in a mix. Kind of DJ style performatively. But one thing I really like doing with high pass filters and drum mixes is giving them a lot of resonance and creating a bass boost. Now that might sound counterintuitive. A high pass will cut bass, it will cut things lower than the frequency. But if we tune that frequency to right where the kick drum is and give it a lot of resonance, we'll get this peak of bass boost right around the cutoff. So we'll go high res, mild setting here. In fact, let's make it oscillate. Hear it there, so as I back it off, you grab some headphones or turn your speakers up, listen to the difference here. Elongating that bass. This big bass boost around the kick drum there. Now I have an envelope follower, which is achieved by patching the drums into ARC here and using this function generator to create this envelope followed signal, which if I just set it normal just set that normal there on a utility I'm just using off screen, we could use this to say open up the filter's cutoff. We have an attenuator, so you could invert that from an open filter this kind of weird sucking auto filter effect. Let's try that in high pass. But we're going to use this here with the input VCA. Let's just set the filter quite mild here. Patching into drive and turning that up. This now works like an expander. The loud signals at the input create more voltage on my envelope follower and open this more. The quieter signals don't open it as much. So it kind of expands out the dynamics. It's the opposite of a compressor. However, if I offset this and invert it, so I'll offset first, you can see that going up. This is a 5-volt offset now, opening this up. And then I'll invert that envelope follower. So we're coming down from the offset position. And you can hear it gives this heavy compression effect. Playing around with the times on the function generator would be like your compressions attack and release. Let's add that bass boost again. Because we're losing quite a bit of that kick as it compresses itself. It's just nice to boost them back in there. And then finally, I have this AUDIORATE signal, which is coming from Honor into a VCA controlled by a random voltage from a sample and hold. And you can see the level of that changing, so we randomly get these little kind of gurgles or blurps in the frequency there. So here we're self-patching to create some additional grit and distortion. In this case, I'm using the right output to patch back into morph both left and right filters. It's creating all sorts of kind of instability, grit, saturation. This is a pulse with some PWM from Honor here playing a volt per octave pattern. That's coming into the left input, and we're listening to the left output in mono. The right output is patched into the scope here, and it's the difference between left and right. It's creating that changing image there on the screen. And I want to patch this back in. Let's start with, say, frequency. And this is feedback because the right output modulating frequency modulates the frequency of the left filter and the right filter, and as that changes it comes back in again. So we're getting feedback from the right output back into frequency modulated. But where I've had the most fun results here is actually just patching into the mode. So we're still just listening to left in and left out, left in almost to right. We're offsetting that right side and using it as a self-patched AUDIORATE modulator to the filter mode. I think it sounds great. Kind of opens up some new tones. I have an envelope here from ARC where I can adjust its level. We'll go into volt per octave. So here I'm using the stereo font as a dual VCO. I have one main sequence playing the volt per octave. It doesn't track across a huge range, but I've got some tracking here for this sequence. The voices are in stereo into their own VCAs with their own envelopes, and I'm offsetting the span of one to create this kind of harmony or different interval on certain steps. So simply turning up the resonance is enough to get these oscillating. I'm in the mild resonance mode. We could go wild. For a richer wave shape. I'm happy with this clean sound here. And the span will offset the right output higher or lower in pitch. So patching in a volt per octave signal. This is the green trace here. And as I mentioned, this doesn't have a big range of accurate tracking, but it's enough to get some patterns out of your vault proactive sequences here. Now I then wanted to offset one of these with the frequency span, but just on certain steps. So I made this blue trace sequence on this blue cable and patching that into frequency span. And then I thought, let's play around with some FM. I'm patching in the honor here. This is playing the same vault proactive sequence, so we'll patch this into frequency. And there's a range of kind of full-on analog FM tones. But I then wanted to take a copy of the output here into FM on Honor for some cross modulation. So Honor modulates the FM on the stereo font. The out of the stereo font that's already modulated by Honor goes back to modulate linear FM here. And I like these kind of dissonant, kind of odd analog FM tones. I'll reduce the level in my VCA here and add some envelopes. The red trace is the left side, the yellow trace is the right side. Without FM. Nice clean dual sine waves here. So here's a fun patch that I've been head bobbing along to for a long time now. And I figured I should turn the camera on and show you what's going on. I'm doing some stereo filter pings. But with modulation we have some FM. We're pushing the level in and out of these pings. The filter type, which changes the tone of the pings, the frequency and the span, and randomly triggering both sides differently. Have these drums. And then this is all the ST font. And it's this fascinating, odd, stereo filter ping world. Let's pull out the modulation and build it back up. So I've nothing plugged in here other than my inputs, which are two envelopes from ARC. I'm sending two different random rhythms with different probabilities to the left and right envelopes. And they're just really tight decay envelopes as short triggers into the inputs here. To ping a filter, you put its resonance very close to oscillation, but just below it. And you get these little percussive sounds. Now frequency will be the pitch of those. Span would alter the pitch of the right side filter. And the mode, interestingly, in low pass mode, you get these cleaner, less clicky pings. And in high pass mode, we hear a bit more of this noise that the resonance is pulling through, and all that top end click. Bandpass is the kind of cleanest response, if you like, and I recommend starting there. Now the green trace is a random pitch CV. I'm going to patch this in to the vault per octave, so it moves the whole filter's core. I then have another random rhythm, not playing as frequently, which is the blue trace, a little bit harder to see there, and that's going into the filter span. So that span, the difference in the right side will change at a slower pace while the whole frequency of the filter changes with this green trace here. And then I thought it'd be interesting to actually change the level of the input up and down for some dynamics. So the yellow trace here is a slow triangle LFO that's just bringing the level of those pings up and down for something more dynamic. you ping this with a stronger, louder input, and you get a louder output. I'm then moving filter mode with this red tracer, cable, and LFO. So this pushes in and out of those duller low pass pings through the cleaner band pass and to the clicky high pass. And just a push in and out of different decays and occasionally a little droning note. Here's another random voltage, not shown on data, to the resonance amount. And occasionally that will just push enough voltage in to make these ring. A little bit like that. Finally, here's some FM from an AUDIORATE oscillator. It's the sine out of honour into frequency. And just setting that against a really simple kick and snare. Back in. So here we're exploring AUDIORATE modulation. We've already heard some of this in the video, wanted to look at it kind of explicitly and in more detail. And this is the patch that I built up while playing around with it. Without the effects. A mode shifting, stereo, modulated modulation, modulating, AUDIORATE modulation. God, that's a word salad. Patch. Let's pull it and look at AUDIORATE modulation and the basics first. So coming into the stereo font here is again a saw wave from Honor. Quite a lot of resonance, but we're in the mild mode. And a bandpass. Now the yellow trace here, it's a bit harder to see a really fast AUDIORATE signal, but yellow cable is going to go into the frequency to AUDIORATE modulate from a much higher tuned oscillator. And that's first coming through a VCA because I'm going to modulate the depth of that later on, but for now this is near enough the oscillator patch straight in. Let's try a low pass. And play with the tuning. And you can tune in nice harmonious new overtones that create this interesting kind of stepped wave here, if you can see that on the scope. But it's those high-pitched yoy kind of vocally yeah yoy yoy. Those are the tones that I really like here. Now in terms of modulating modulation, if I close the VCA that has the higher pitch in it, you can hear that overtone go away. And if I modulate that with a steady clocked envelope, we can have a modulated modulation, and that's where this patch started. I'm then adding another envelope which is playing a different rhythm into volt per octave. There's a kind of secondary filter input here for frequency. And I have the level control here on ARC. So it's easy to dial in an amount. I then have a sequence to this higher pitch oscillator, which if I just let that drone through, hopefully you can hear the higher pitch sequence. So that top end AUDIORATE overtone is changing. Let's go to bandpass. Really vocal, kind of expressive tone. And then I have an LFO to the span. So we're spanning the frequency. of that right side. And it's attenuated quite heavily. I'm then going to span the mode, which will push that right side closer to low and high pass responses, where the left side stays as a bandpass. With a lot of movement without an actual pitch sequence to the main oscillator, let's actually add the main pitch sequence to both oscillators. A nicely complex, AUDIORATE focused, nice complex patch. If you got this far in the video, drop a hard sync in the comments. You can support me at patreon.com/DivKid. Hit like and subscribe, that all helps out the channel, and I'll see you next time. Bye!